Hi, I'm Janice Edwards.
I'm Charleston Pierce.
Coming up on Bay Area Vista, we're talking about the film Jobs and much, much more.
Join us.
Bay Area Vista.
Welcome to Bay Area Vista. I'm Janice Edwards. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have our guest co-host Charleston Pierce with us. Charleston, nice to have you with us. And we are excited because today we're talking with Joshua Michael Stern about the film Jobs.
Boss!
What are you working on?
It's a computer terminal that hooks up to the TV for the display. Steve?
Wow. Welcome to Apple Computer.
It's gonna be so cool. He's just a kid. Steve, you're just a kid.
Is this everything? Startup.
You expecting something else?
Maybe something a little less Manson family.
Trust me, I'm my INDEPENDENT shit hustling. Chasing dreams since I was 14.
Hey, Steve, what's going on? Steve!
You're on the Macintosh team.
What's a Macintosh?
He's trying to start a war with IBM.
Return to the Mac, return to the Mac, the Mac. Y'all can't stop me.
I'm trying to build an Apple, and they're taking it away from me?
You are your own worst enemy, and this company's.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, it's great to be here.
Tell us about your decision to take on this particular story.
Well, I mean, the story of Steve Jobs, the icon, the sort of, Da Vinci of our time, was something I couldn't resist. I mean, it was daunting in that he's an icon and he's so recognizable even today, but trying to get into the bones of who he was and trying to know what motivated him and to try to tell the story of the man who created such amazing sort of revolutionary products that we all use and communicate with every day just was, irresistible. I had to.
If we're gonna do this thing, we need to come up with a name. Something.
Yeah, I know.
Something catchy. Something.
I've been thinking about it.
Electric.
It just needs to be like, I don't know.
Yeah, what about Enterprise Computers?
No Star Trek names.
What about
I swear,
Kirk
I will
Enterprise?
drive this car right off this road. I will run the car right off the road.
Jesus, calm down. Seriously. Okay, nothing Trekkie, Jesus.
It just needs to be like something that people will relate to, Like, it needs to be something that you see and you're just like, man, I just gotta have it. Apple.
Excuse me?
Apple.
Apple like the fruit?
The fruit of creation. Apple. It's simple but sophisticated. It comes before Atari in the phone book, too.
That is so much better than phaser beam computers.
So we saw the film last night, and Charleston, you wanted to ask him something about this.
I was fascinated with it, that, the beginning part, the
Yeah.
garage, like how it all came to, the think tank.
Yeah.
And there's so many different things, but the question I have is, what do you want our children to take away from this film? Because they're already growing up with the computer in hand.
Yeah.
And now they have this opportunity to take it to a whole nother level. What are some of the things you think that you hope that the kids would take for its inspiration?
Well, I mean, there's a quote at the end of the film where Steve says, when you realize that the world was created by people who were no smarter than you, that everything around us is something that you can do. I also liked the message that these were guys who were sort of on the outside and who were deeply flawed, as we all are, but that they weren't defined by their flaws. They basically overcame them, and they revolutionized the way we see the world and that we interact. So going forward without fear, that's so important. And Steve pushed forward fearlessly, and that's what you want your children to know, that go for your dream and don't be afraid and don't be derailed by obstacles, because Steve was fired from his company.
Wow.
And he came right back.
Right.
Keep your eye on the ball, focus, and I think and don't let people sort of keep you down even when you feel misunderstood. And for me, that's a huge part of this movie as well, is that Steve Jobs, people don't realize, for so many years, for almost 30 years of his life, was misunderstood.
Wow.
And we all feel misunderstood.
And you do a great,
we all
great
feel
job
misunderstood.
of conveying that in the
Yeah.
movie, from even at Atari when they decide to let him work at night so he doesn't have to interact with the other
right.
coworkers because he wasn't user-friendly when it came to telling people, you're an idiot. And
Right,
he needs to
right.
do that.
He was overly honest.
Right.
He was very honest, yeah.
Well, in terms of access then, because of course there's another film about Jobs that that Steve Wozniak is a consultant on. How much access did you have, and who were the people who helped you gain the insight that you had for Jobs in this film?
We spoke to a lot of the original guys in the garage, Daniel Kotke, who advised on the film.
It's the Industrial Revolution. No more decks, no more mainframes. That changes everything.
It's pretty cool, I guess. Hi, Charlene. Hello. It's profound. How could you not tell me about this before?
No, I was just working on it for my own. It was a
Exactly,
hobby.
exactly. For your own, for you. It's what you wanted. It's what your gut, your instinct wanted. Your big evolved brain wanted something and it didn't exist, and so you just willed it into existence.
We interviewed a lot of the people who actually worked on the original teams with Steve, and Ashton spoke to a lot of Steve's friends. So we got very close to him without actually getting into the family, or we did not obviously speak to Woz because he is working on the other film. So we really got a lot of feedback. And what was interesting is that as much and as many people that knew him, so few actually knew him. He was a real enigma. People would work with him for 30 years and say, you know, Steve, I don't know if he knew I had children or if I was even married, because Steve was so focused on what he was doing and so much about what his company was about and about the products that they were creating. So we got a lot of input, but at the same time, the movie isn't one that answers all the questions.
Right.
It's not here to tell you exactly what made him tick. The movie was about discussing the sort of emotional base of where he came from, and hopefully by the end, the sort of sum total of the movie gives you a sense of him, a feeling of who the man was.
I have a two-part question.
Yeah.
Thank you for that answer. Working with Ashton,
Yeah.
how exciting, and were you surprised at all?
I was surprised from the first meeting with him for the film. He walked into the room, and I think he was already channeling Steve.
Yeah, and he definitely did that throughout the movie too. It was incredible.
But he did all this. He did so much homework.
When I met Josh, I was like, God, you're more like Steve Jobs than I am, in a weird way. And I kind of looked at and to him a lot, just to get into that care of the detail, which I think he really has. I think he looks and sees. You always know when a director has seen the detail, because they'll come up to you after a take and they'll say, that thing that you did, and you go, wow, I didn't think that anyone noticed. And he's the guy that sees that little detail, and it makes all the difference in the world.
I mean, he studied the way the guy walked and talked. We studied and we discussed all of the choices Steve made, a lot of them questionable choices as far as sort of the things that he did and he said. But he had to find a love for the man so that he could justify these choices as an actor. And I think he did an amazing job at that. And he worked very, very hard, and he really got into Steve's skin. You know, and as a director, you can't ask for anything more than an actor who comes and studies and prepares. I mean, he lost 15, 20 pounds. He went on the fruitarian diet, which was this diet that, well, all Steve ate was fruit.
Right,
and Ashton did that, and it got him sick. He was sick, for a bit. Right before we started shooting, he got ill. So he really made a huge, valiant attempt at living in the skin of Steve Jobs.
One of the things that struck us at the screening last night where Ashton was sharing is that when he heard about Jobs passing, he really wanted to make sure he told the story. So was anyone else ever considered? I can't imagine because he did such a great job, but
well, what's interesting is that there was a long list, of course, but Ashton was my first meeting. And, I just left thinking that A, he could do the role. But B, I also thought that this actor in this role, in and of itself, is out of the box. And it's provocative. And there's something interesting about it, even for those who are skeptical about the choice, which of course there would be.
Right.
That in and of itself is something that's interesting. And I think that's what you try to do in a movie. You try to create something that stirs it up, that, you know, sort of messes with the norm and the preconceptions. And I think just by putting him in this movie, it did that. But of course I wouldn't have done that if I didn't feel in my gut instinctually that he could really pull the role off.
He definitely
Yeah.
did that. We were talking about genius too, and how it's such a challenge many times. You mentioned how Steve was seen as an outsider and misunderstood, that
Yeah.
when you have your genius and also you have a spirit, what do you do in terms of making sure that your spirit lives in the world? So any thoughts about the spiritual aspects of this?
The spiritual in what way?
In terms of Steve made a lot of choices that were unpopular at times in terms of people and different things, but at the same time he had a philosophy of life. He had traveled to India, and he had a sense of connection in the world, and so there was some spiritual philosophy there, even if it didn't come through clearly.
You know, Steve was very aware of spirituality, religion. He studied it. He understood that the priests in the church wore black because the church didn't want the congregants to associate them with anything of this world. They wanted the congregants to associate them only through God. And so at a certain time, he wore those mock black shirts because he didn't want people to associate him with anything but his products. So he was about bringing them something that could better their lives. And he wanted to be associated with that. He found love through giving people those products in ways that he probably didn't find love in his personal life. And you could see in the film the struggles in his personal life. The attempts to identify with people. You know, he was a very flawed man, but he wanted it and cared very deeply about bringing people something, bringing them love. I mean, those were gifts.
You saw that when you had the scene with his daughter at his house. Apparently he embraced his daughter.
At the end he did,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, he was a man who created his own reality. He basically said it was this way. And that was an interesting flaw of his, in that he created that reality for himself and you couldn't quite break through it until he came to that realization on his own. But you know, I think that's all of us in some ways. I mean, we see the world sometimes how we want to see it. He was just the extreme of that. And I think that he really believed in his heart for 30 years that a computer could be an appliance. He once went through a Macy's when he was younger and he saw Cuisinart. He loved the idea that something so simple as chopping could be made and given a package and something clean, and you can now just put fruit into this and it could just chop it. It made your life easier. And he felt computers could be there in your house, you know. And I've always felt that the iPhone was really the ultimate sort of realization of Steve Jobs' dream, because his problems were always that his technology was so beautiful, but it was expensive. So it was always hard to sort of buy a Mac if you wanted, because it was so much cheaper. But there's something about the fact that with the iPhone, you can really have that sort of, the carriers come in between it, you know, Verizon, so that you could be I was at a lunch and there was a busboy who had an iPhone, who was probably making under $8 an hour. And then there was a producer who was worth millions who had an iPhone. And both of them were using the technology. And that was a moment, I think, for Steve, which would have made him probably the proudest, because it was the realization of what he wanted when he was 20 years old, which is like, let's bring this to people. This is something people want.
And making it accessible.
And making it accessible.
Well, you certainly gave us an accessibility to Steve Jobs' life, and thank you so much for the film.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I told you I love your name, Joshua.
Yes, exactly.
My son's name
Proud
Joshua.
father.
I was like, thank you so much, Joshua.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I
It's a pleasure and
appreciate it.
honor.
Thank you.
You guys did a really, really great job.
If you'd like to know more about the film Jobs, details are on our screen. And there's so much going on in our Bay Area, Charleston. We want to tell you about some other organizations. So enjoy.
I'm Janice Edwards. We are on location at the 3rd annual Successfully Raising Young Black Men Parenting Conference. We'll be talking with some of the speakers today about why this conference is designed to make a difference for the youth and the parents of Oakland.
Always tell your sons or daughters that they can do it versus you can't. In our house, we don't use the word I can't. When my kids were growing up, and that's what the book is based upon, my 3 kids, I never tell them what they couldn't do. I always tell them what you can do, okay? And oftentimes when we tell our children something that they can't do, they're gonna prove it to us. So we gotta reinforce, always learn how to reinforce our children about, yes, you can. I was at a event some time ago, and the fellow was saying that we gotta tell young black men that they have limits in life. And I said, I beg to differ. How are you gonna tell me that I have limits, or your sons that they have limits? And what about, Obama, what if he said, well, I can't be a president, you know? And so this is the kind of stuff that's going on right now. They're telling young men that they can't, what they can't do. And we got to get rid of the word can't and say that it can, okay?
Dr. and Mrs. Barnes, this is the 3rd annual conference. Lady Barnes, I'll ask you, what are your thoughts about the importance of this conference?
I think it's very important. I think our society needs it right now. And it's going to be a blessing.
And Pastor, how are you feeling about this one in particular? You've had the keynote speaker so far.
I think it's excellent. Chuck did a great job, and it's excellent. I think it's going to be better. And as the year go on, we're going to have 4, we're going to have 5, we're going to have 6, we're going to continue on. It's going excellent.
What can people look forward to for the rest of the conference?
These wonderful classes.
A major statement. We have got to.
What does it mean for a number of leaders and pastors to come together, especially while unfortunately we continue to hear the tragic stories about loss of life in Oakland?
I think it's important that pastors and the faith community in general come together, because in a culture that has shifted, where we hear of deaths of young people, young children on a constant basis, I think it's important, it's vital that the faith community come together to address this issue. We can't leave it just to the police, can't leave it just to City Hall. The faith community, which has historically been a leader in changing the culture of our community, has to come together to address these kinds of issues.
Giving these things almost cost us nothing, but we act like it does. And anyone who's been married for more than 7 years, somebody's keeping count. And so, man, you've got to process that with your loved ones. Are we okay? Is there anything I need to, stop doing, start doing? Where are we at on this? That is strong communication. And imagine if we can embed that into our children and grandchildren. Because remember, we marry people who are like our parents, good, bad.
Why did you want to participate in the Successfully Raising Young Black Men Conference today?
First of all, I was born and raised in Oakland, California. And I just think this is such a phenomenal opportunity for a conference to share and to participate.
And you were speaking today. Can you share a little bit about what you were talking about? We heard a little bit about family matters and planning Post-its for your wife. What was the overall message that you wanted to convey?
My talk was about digging deep wells for dry seasons. And it's really about investing into relationships. So when you hit dry, rough seasons, there's plenty of resources available: mercy, grace, love, forgiveness, and understanding.
It's not that the kids don't have the ability to give it. It's that somebody sometimes has to challenge the schools, because everybody say, I'm listening. Everybody is not looking through the same pair of lenses.
Recently, you were walking down International Boulevard carrying a cross to share a message. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Actually, the Lord in prayer told me to take the message of the cross. And here's how he said it, that the message of the cross is the most powerful and relevant message that was sent to the world. And the thing that I discovered as I was walking from San Leandro all the way to the absolute end of West Oakland, it's probably about 12 miles. What I discovered is that message of the cross, I didn't have to say anything. It communicated to everybody that saw it. It transcended ethnic background, it transcended language. It was a powerful message, and people really needed to hear it. We had some homicides that had taken place, and people really wanted that message of peace. And I didn't have to say anything. All I did was carry the cross.
You were teaching earlier. What were you discussing, and what do you hope people will take away from this conference?
What we talked about was the importance for parents to stress education to their kids. And we talked about a lot of things, but I came out with 3 points, and one was that who were our greatest teachers, and our greatest teachers are our parents and guardians. Those are the greatest teachers. The parents can speak into the kids' lives. The parents can tell the kids who they are spiritually, who they are historically, who they are culturally, who they are morally. The parents are the ones that are supposed to speak that into the kids' lives. And then we talked about race really matters. And the numbers really don't lie. And so we talked about the two different, everybody don't look through life with the same pair of lenses. And we just have to understand that. We don't have to be ugly about it, but we have to understand that some systems were established by people who don't see things through the lenses that benefits you. And you call it systemic poverty, you call it systemic flaws in education, you call it all of those things because they were established, they were policies that were established by people who were looking at things different.
The money comes to the district, it's not per child. It's an average per child, but it goes to the district. How the district spends it is in the plan.
You talked about the discrepancy between what's invested in a child in Oakland and Piedmont. Can you share a little bit about that briefly?
The state allows a certain amount per child per school year. In addition, parents in school districts are allowed to raise additional money to support the education of the children. And in the past, parents in Piedmont raised 3 times as much as parents or the school district raises in Oakland for their children. So that presents quite a discrepancy in resources.
What will you take away from the conference?
I find it as an investment. The morning speaker talked about investing in our children, and I think that's real important. They learn that we invest as parents to learn more about how we can invest in our children, and then that can sustain us better as a people and as a country.
Can you talk about the spirit of fatherlessness or the fatherless spirit?
We've got to return back, particularly in our churches, and create not just a church, a safe place, but an area where there is the spirit of the Father, because that's what young people are yearning for, is to be in the presence of a father. And we've got to raise men as spiritual fathers, not just biological, but we've got to teach men and restore. I don't believe there's going to be a move of God in our nation till the men of God in our nation agree and understand the need to spiritually refather this nation.
What has it meant for you to be here today?
I'm thrilled.
From what I've seen from successfully raising young black men here, it should be on a launching pad for more areas in the state and even in the world, because there's a lot of young men that fall to the wayside because of absenteeism of fathers.
Carl, you would have to pay for what he did. Huh? I got a daughter who's 14 years old. Your son impregnates my daughter. Huh? That's going to cost me some money. Yeah. And I value her more than I value a broken windshield. And I've said to some of my legislative friends, why don't you all have some form of legislation, whatever the word is, where any young man who impregnates a young lady, his parents become responsible financially for the welfare of that young lady. Come on. Huh? Huh? They just look at me. I think that's fair. You broke my windshield, you pay for it. Huh? Is my daughter more valuable than a windshield? Is your son to walk around bragging about how many? Huh? I had a young man to curse me out like I've never been cursed out before. When in a crowd of other young men, he was boasting about how many babies he had. I got 12 and I'm working on 13 now. And I confronted him. That's right. He got cussed out, but that's okay. So what I'm trying to say, trying to get some feedback from y'all. What do you think?
Right.
Tell me your thoughts about the conference today. What have you learned?
I've learned that the community as a whole still needs a lot of work, outside, inside, from government, from all levels, to bring Oakland back together to the prominent city that it's been before.
What I'm leaving with is a connection to understanding more information need to get out there regarding parenting and raising our youth. And then we all know things going on in America against the black male. So this definitely gave me a perspective on my role I should play as a black male, getting more involved and giving some of my time and energy to helping out whenever I can through ministry, or just being more responsible for sharing information and sharing myself with some youths that certainly could take advantage of my time and assistance.
I have a goal now to make sure that some of the schools that I work in, make sure that they're aware of this local control funding program. And so where that parents or the level of funding that they get is with the parental participation and involvement in the school where the child is at. When you get more parents there, you get more funding per child. How many, since this is new, how many of them know about it? So that's one of the things I'm going to do.
I'm from Louisiana originally. I've been in California for the last 40 years, and I've just come back to California because I was in Louisiana. I was appointed by Governor Blanco. During her administration, I was the executive director of elderly affairs for the governor's office. Now that I'm back, I've gotten myself back involved in the communities, focusing on elder issues. And when I found out that Pastor Barnes was focusing on grandparents raising grandkids, immediately I got involved with him several months ago. And one of the reasons, because under the direction of the Agency of Elderly Affairs in Louisiana, we supported a grandparents raising grandkids program, which is a pilot program. There are only about 3 in America. 1 was in Baton Rouge and 2 in the East Coast. And so we're trying to design, develop, and implement something similar here through the Abyssinian Baptist Church, along with Pastor Barnes being the orchestrator, and I'm supporting him in that effort. And we've been working diligently with other individuals as well.
What I would like to share is be here next year. It's very beneficial. Even though I am a mother and a grandmother, I keep learning, not just daily, yearly, hourly, and I learn from my future. And when I say I learn from my future, the children that we're raising, they're also teaching at the same time. They're giving us inspiration. They're saying, please, don't leave us out, don't forget us, but invest in us.
If you'd like more information about Successfully Raising Young Black Men Incorporated, details are on our screen.
And that's our show. I'm Janice Edwards. Charleston, it's always so great to have you with us. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time.
Oh, great. If you'd like to contact Charleston, details are on our screen.
Life can be much broader.
I love you, Steve.
You can embrace it, change it.
You refuse to do anything that vaguely escapes your comfort zone.
Improve it, make your mark upon it.